Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. So today's topic is training, and the title is The Forgotten Muscles of Powerlifting. Specifically today, we're going to be talking about the lower quads. So I might turn this into a little bit of a series because there's quite a few muscles that people who do the sport of powerlifting don't address correctly, or they don't address completely. So they tend to focus too much on the big lifts. And for certain body types and certain genetics, if you just squat more to get better at squats, bench more to get better at bench, and deadlift more to get better at deadlifts, that does work. But it's the rarity more than the common. Okay? So for most people, when they squat, let's just take that for example. They will over-rely on their strongest muscles. They will under-involve their weaker muscles. Their technique is going to suffer quite a bit because they're moving within their strongest pathway, not in what should be their strongest pathway. So an example of this is I started working with somebody and recently, and when you're looking at their squat is absolutely freaking amazingly consistent. So when I went through and watched like 10 videos of squats, I almost had to keep rewatching to be like, did I watch this one already? And then I'd go back to the last one, like watch that and be like, maybe it was this one, and I couldn't tell which one I was watching. And it was amazing how consistent they were. Excellent consistency. However, the pathway that they were squatting with was not correct for long-term progressive strength. So they had some hamstring injuries that were causing them to over-rely on their quadriceps. So they learned that the pathway for them to squat the best with the body that they had today, okay, that like right now, was, and I'm just making up examples of stuff, so let's just give me leeway here on the science of this. Let's just say it was 70% quadricep involvement, 30% hamstring involvement. Now, yes, there are a billion other muscles involved. Let's just move on past that. So they were giving their body 70% of the effort to the quadriceps and only 30% of the effort to the hamstrings. Now, in this percentage analogy, let's assume that for them to be their strongest, they would have to do 50-50, okay? Half quads, half hamstrings. Now, is that exactly true when you think of the power contribution to a total squat? Are the hamstrings and quadriceps evenly contributing to power contribution? No. Okay, there are various differences depending on body types, and oh my god, is there so much variability within that. But within this analogy, what I want to get across is they were over-relying on their quadriceps because their hamstrings had been weakened by an injury and having a resulting surgery, I believe. So with the body that they had, really strong quadriceps and kind of weakened hamstrings, they were squatting, they found a pathway that worked for them. And they squatted so much, they just, you just squat to get better at squats, right? No, because they squatted so much that they were very consistent at their squat, but they weren't using the right squat. It would have been better for them to do individualized accessory work on the hamstrings to improve the hamstring strength. So then the hamstrings could contribute more to their technique, and therefore their squats would actually be in a better, more powerful position. And then, if you add consistency, they would get significantly stronger. So if you take a broken system and you make it as efficient as the broken system can be, that will still not be as efficient as a healthy system being as efficient as it can be. Now, what happens if you have an injury and you don't have the chance to get that thing back to full health? Okay, I understand that. But make sure you put in efforts to ensure that it gets back to its full health as much as possible. Okay? So sometimes people just do like, oh, I did 8 weeks of rehab and I'm good to go. No. So depending on like muscle damages and like things that can happen to muscles, it can take years sometimes to rehab and fix things. So the point of this is that if we want to be our best, we have to ensure that all of the muscles available to us are at their bests. Now, In this example, okay, of today's podcast, we're going to talk about the lower quadriceps. And there are many other muscles, so we'll talk about those, in some series coming up. But today's focus is the lower quadriceps. Recently, I went to a powerlifting meet, and it was kind of funny because at the meet, the concept of the lower quads being underdeveloped was extremely, extremely obvious at this meet that I went to. And what I mean by that is you could see it aesthetically. So the guys had big bellies. So even if the guys were in shape, okay, let's go through. I'm editing myself too much here. So let's go with the big dudes, okay? The big dudes had big bellies, big thick upper backs, kind of wide lats, but more like a rounded over back, real thick lower back, okay? So real thick midsection. They had no ass, and they had no legs. So they're a bowling ball on twigs, is what it looked like. Now I'm being an asshole, but that is pretty much what it looked like. So they had enormously thick backs, enormously thick midsection, which they would say, oh, it's muscle, it's muscle. Yeah, but why don't you have any muscle on your butt? Why don't you have any muscle on your legs? Okay, so that aesthetic was there. There was also the aesthetic of guys who looked good. Okay, they had relatively lean abs, good shouldered, good shoulders, good arms, and they didn't really have much of a butt at all. Decent-ish thigh size, but there was no actual musculature to the area right above their kneecap. So that showed up even on the guys who were in quote-unquote good shape. So they had no muscle right above their kneecap. Their thighs, okay, from the mid-thigh down or in the quads was almost non-existent. And you'd see it in some of the females too. So there were some big ladies, thick in the midsection, thick upper backs, really no butt either. So whatever the butt they had was kind of fat more than muscle. And they had thin legs as well. Then there was a lot of girls that had really thick upper thighs, okay, from doing a whole bunch of hinges. So they've been doing just a bunch of hinges, which is like stiff leg deadlifts, Romanian deadlifts, like sumo stance deadlifts, just the way they might have to squat, the way they might have to do a conventional deadlift. They just never really used the musculature by their knees. So they never got into exercises where they were uprighted and their knees had to push forward. Now you'll see that example of a physique, you'll see it in lower quadricep development in people who do Olympic lifting and people who do like CrossFit style stuff, because they have the upright torso and their knees are pushed forward to their toes, sometimes even past their toes. That uprighted torso is much more common in those sports. Whereas in powerlifting, they typically do not have an uprighted torso. So they're going to have more of that low bar squat type frequency occurring amongst athletes. Whereas in Olympic lifting, they're going to be doing high bar squats type stuff, okay, especially in CrossFit. So you'll see in the type of kind of like genre of lifting that the person does, that it will really create an aesthetic look, signature of that genre. So if I lined up like 5 people who said they all were like elite athletes in whatever their lifting category was, you'd probably very quickly be able to pick out the powerlifter, the Olympic lifter, the CrossFitter, like the strongman. You should be able to pick them out pretty much because at elite levels, their body types are very different. Now, there are occasionally those freaks every now and then who are kind of crossovers, but they're few and far in between. And the reason why we know them is because they're so freakish. So I always tell somebody, I'm like, well, you can't do this, this, and this. Well, so-and-so did it. Okay, the fact that you know their name means that it was so damn rare that they're famous for it. Okay, so no one is famous for driving because we all drive every day. There's people who are famous for driving in really special ways. Okay, like NASCAR maybe. So, but just the common regular way of driving is not famous. Therefore, it's not it's not amazing. So therefore, you don't have a singular name for it. So, since we're looking today at powerlifting, the lower quad development, like we said, is underdeveloped in powerlifters. We saw it aesthetically at the athletes at the powerlifting meet, but you also can see it in their squatting styles. So the people who had very low quad development, okay, they didn't really have great quads, especially down by the knees. They tended to lose body control and rely on momentum in the bottom half of the range of motion. So as they would squat and their knees would come forward towards their toes, they would lose their leverages of their strength. So all of a sudden they kind of bounce to the bottom, bounce back up halfway, then fight their way through the middle of the lift, over relying on their low and mid backs to stand back up. So it's people with thicker quads that you'll typically see them be more controlled to the bottom of the movement and back up. Now there is tons of exceptions to this, but this is generally general truths. So or general believed to be truths. How about that? So people who control themselves better to the bottom tend to have better glutes and they tend to have better front quads. Okay, lower quad by the knees. People who do kind of like the I'm going to control myself halfway down, then just drop, they tend to be missing butts and they tend to be missing the quads right above their knees. So you'll see that in their squat styles. And typically if somebody drops to the bottom, like they control halfway, drop the rest of the way, they're very likely to be pushed forward by the barbell and have a rounded back as they try to come back up. So sometimes people even think that rounded back presence is actually a weakness of the upper back. And oh my God, no. No. So their back is rounding to allow their hips to come underneath the bar. So it lowers the leverage, okay? The physics, there's I don't know all this stuff, but there's the vector arm or leverage arm, but basically from their hip to the bar is too long of a distance that their body can't support that distance due to there not being enough musculature around the hip, okay? And their butt is going to tuck under their lower back to shorten the leverage because now the bar just has the pressure of the bar just goes to the mid back. And they use their mid and lower back to stand upright rather than their hips. So you'll see that happen. If somebody doesn't have very strong lower quads, their hips are left to kind of do all of the work, but they probably don't have much of a butt either. And then their hips will dive underneath their hips. Their hips will dive underneath the bar, and they end up with that rounded over position. So the reason why the body got into the rounded over position was because out of all the muscles available, the upper back and mid back were the strongest. So it just said, here, you do it. So then when people have rounded backs like that, they'll go into the gym thinking it's a rounded back problem. They train the shit out of their back, and they just make their strong thing even stronger, hopefully they don't hurt it. But then all of a sudden their technique never really gets any better. So they might move up 5-10 pounds because their strong thing can now move more weight. But they never address the real issue. The form breakdown never goes away. So they're always just addressing the wrong things. You also run into people with patella pains, so patella tendonitis pains. So the tendons around the kneecap, they'll have issues and pains. People have pains up in the top of their hips sometimes from underdeveloped quads, like lower quads. So there's a lot of issues that can come from that presence. So how can we ensure that we don't fall into that trap? Well, you want to include certain exercises into your programming. I'm going to name what they are, okay? These are examples of movements that allow the knees to come forward towards the toes, but do so in controlled manners. And you do them as accessory movements so that way you can control the weight loads for a correct weight load so you don't overly stress the tissues. So we're going to go through and give this advice as if you had normal, healthy knees. If you have unhealthy knees, you can try these movements, but try them very light. If they don't feel good, okay, search what a banded TKE is. TKE, the initials TKE, it stands for terminal knee extension. Do some banded TKEs, okay, like 3 sets of 20 reps on each leg. Then try these movements at as light a weight as possible, like maybe body weight. See if that helps your knee pain go away, okay? If you have more knee issues, email us. Our email is brutalirongym@gmail.com. We'll help you with patella tendonitis, any kind of knee pain like that, but you might have more of a specialty type case than what we can give on a podcast, okay? So the best examples of exercises, and there are many of them, I just want to kind of give 3 categories right now. So is make sure you include these in your workouts, and you want to include them after your main lifts. So after you've already done your squats for the day, for example, you'd come back and after squats and try to catch one of these exercises. So one category is lunges. Yes, power lifters, you should be doing lunges. They're not only for bodybuilders, okay? So you can do walking lunges, you can do regular lunges where you step forward and push back. You can do reverse lunges where you stay where you are and step back to lunge down. So there's tons of them. We do lunges with a barbell, either in like upper back positioning, like a squat position. You can do a front rack position for the barbell. You can use dumbbells if you want. So you can do them hanging at your sides. You can do a goblet hold. You can do a front racked position. You can use safety squat bar. We even have a Duffalo bar from Kabuki Strength, which is a really good bar because it doesn't roll off your shoulders because it has a bow to it. And you can even use camber bars as well. So there are a lot of variations. So with just walking lunges, you can do that with a barbell front racked or on your back. You can do walking lunges with dumbbells. You can do walking lunges with safety squat bar. You can do walking lunges with camber bar. You can do walking lunges with Duffalo bar. Okay. Then for regular lunges, like where you step forward and push back to the same place you're at, you can do them with all of those things as well. With reverse lunges, you can do them with all of those things as well. And especially with any of the specialty bars, okay, or regular barbell front racked or back racked, if you're doing a stationary lunge, you can even add banding to it or chains to it if you want. So there are easily within just lunges themselves. Okay, if you want to do a different type of lunge every week for a year, there are over 52 ways to do lunges. Yep. Okay. So that's one of the categories you can include into your training, and you absolutely should. Another option, okay, of including into your program in place of lunges, or if you need extra attention on the quadriceps, you can do them at squat day and deadlift day. So you can do them twice a week. So one of the days of the week you can do a lunge variation. Maybe another day of the week you do a step up variation. And there are various heights you can use. You can use a height that puts your knee above your hip crease, which is kind of like a below paralleled step up. So that's going to reduce the amount of weight load you can do, but it helps to kind of open up that range of motion if mobility is a concern of yours. You can also do it at a lower height and just work on power and strength by having a heavier weight load. Okay, so it kind of depends on which one you need. You can also vary your distance from the thing you're stepping up onto. If you're super duper close to it, that's going to involve more quads. The further and further away you get from it, that's going to involve more hamstrings and glutes. So if you have patella tendonitis, if you have knee pains, do step ups from far away from the block, where your knee stays directly above your heel in the starting position. Okay, so that way when you go to step up, you have to push and push through your heel, use your hamstrings and glutes, and that'll reduce the tension on the patella tendon. Okay, so you can vary your distance from the block. You can also do step ups with a barbell front racked or back racked. You can do them with dumbbells, you can do them with safety squat bar, Duffalo bar, camber bar. And you can do step ups against bands or chains. So there are over 52 ways to do step ups. And then there's also front squat alternatives to where you're not limited by your mid-back, thoracic back strength. So you want to do a front squat to make sure your quads are the limiting factor, not your ability to brace against the position, to hold the position correctly. So you can do front squat variations on a belt squat because there's no spinal loading whatsoever. You can do front squats with a camber bar. That tends to be easier on mid-back tension. And you can also do leg press variations that mimic front squats. You can have a low, narrowed, toed flared out position on the foot plate in a leg press, and that'll help mimic more of a front squats type feel. Okay? So those are the suggestions of example movements that you can include into your program to target and emphasize the lower quads. Now, how many sets, how many reps, all that stuff in podcast number 214, titled Understanding Rep Ranges and Expected Results. We talk about the different time under tension ranges that you should do depending on what result you want to get from it. So a shortcut, okay? So go listen to podcast 214 if you want the long stuff. If you want a shortcut, per exercise, okay? So if you're going to do lunges or if you're going to do step-ups, but per exercise, you should aim for 2 sets of effort where you have good technique breakdown or muscle failure occurring between 20 to 30 seconds. So you would use whatever weight load is necessary to that your body kind of breaks down in good technique or just muscular failure between 20 to 30 seconds. That's 2 sets, okay? Then you're going to add weight, and you're going to do 2 sets of 10 to 20 seconds of time under tension. So you do 2 sets of 20 to 30 seconds where a good form breaks down. Then you pick whatever weight is appropriate for 2 sets of 10 to 20 seconds. of form breakdown. So you can have a buddy count for you. You can use a stopwatch on your phone. You can do whatever the hell you got to do to make sure you get results. Okay? No bullshit excuses. Just get it done. So that's going to be a good example. Okay? So if you want to build up lower quads to help your overall development in powerlifting, so you absolutely definitely should. Examples of movements to include in your accessories are lunges, step-ups, and front squat alternatives such as belt squats, camber bar squats, front squats, or leg press modifications. For each of those exercises, okay, you only have to do one of those, say, twice a week, or even you can add them 3 times a week. But you would do 2 sets of 20 to 30 seconds of timer attention, and 2 sets of 10 to 20 seconds of timer attention per exercise. Cool. Okay. So if you want to be complete in your strength, you have to be complete in your physique. So powerlifting, you absolutely must pay attention to individual muscular development. Okay. You can't just squat to get better at squats. You can't bench to get better at bench. You can't deadlift to get better at deadlifts. You got to pay attention to individual muscles. So you have to use your accessories as if you're a bodybuilder and trying to isolate out muscles that are important to the main lift of the day. Okay? If you want any programming help whatsoever, email us at brutalirongym@gmail.com. If you just got some questions, we'll send you answers. If you want some actual programming help, of course, we'll do that. But reach out to us if you need some help to make sure that you're your strongest and, more importantly, you're your safest that you can be. Cool. Okay, if you like the podcast, please share it with family and friends. The more people we help, the happier the world will be. Also, if you like this information, you can find more from us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Brutal Iron Gym. And if you have any questions, feedback, or suggestions, we'd love to hear from you. The podcast is for you, so we want to know what you want to learn about. You can tell us at our email at brutalirongym@gmail.com. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening. Thank you for watching.